Back with me are Suzanne Craig, Katie Phang, and Renato Mariotti. So I want to continue this sort of conversation we're having here about the jurors and what's to be expected of them. I'm amazed by this quote from a juror who was actually seated. One of the jurors who was seated at the very end, juror number 11, was asked earlier how she felt about Trump. She responded that she didn't have strong opinions, but added, "I don't like his persona, how he presents himself in public." She then said, "I don't like some of my coworkers, but I don't try and sabotage their work," she says, drawing an outburst of laughter from the jury box. Now, I'm amazed by that. I think that is amazing, but it sort of speaks to this idea that we're trying to find this safe space. Suzanne, do you think that not only is that sort of a great quote, but do you think that's reflective of perhaps how a number of these jurors may feel, even if they weren't necessarily that eloquent? Because they can't say they don't know the guy,
right,
but they say that they can look at the situation fairly.
I think some of them, yes. I think we have some people, I'm sure, in there that don't like him, but can set aside those feelings and move forward. I sat through the Trump criminal trial, the Trump Organization criminal trial in late 2022. Donald Trump wasn't a defendant in that, so it was a little bit easier because they could say, you may hate the guy, but this is about his company. Can you set your feelings about him aside? But, I do think that they're there, but I also think what we saw today, there's some that can be fair, and then we also saw some that got up and said that they could be fair, and then Donald Trump and his team, as well as the government, they have access to the names of these jurors, and they started scrubbing their social media profiles, and they found stuff that contradicted statements like, "I can be fair." They had tweets that were pulled up that were disparaging about the former president, and those jurors were excused and were questioned about that. But we saw that today. So some of them maybe forgot that they'd done it, they didn't disclose it, whatever the case was. It's difficult to pick a jury, and you also are seeing coming into this, and it was jarring this morning. We had 7 jurors picked last night. We came in this morning, and one of them came in and had that change of heart. And part of it was, she was worried that her family knew that she was down there, even though she hadn't identified herself. And the other fellow there was excused. There were some questions about his integrity raised. We don't know if that's why he was excused, but in leaving, he also said he had questions about the identity. Right. So there's just a lot of issues, and it just goes to show how hard this is. And I wouldn't be surprised if we walked in tomorrow and maybe we lose 1 or 2 just based on what happened yesterday.
Renato, this is another part of this that I think is particularly interesting. The fear, right? The fear that everyone would have is that there's somebody who's just some diabolical genius, some Sherlock Holmes, right, who can beat a lie detector and manages to get themselves on the jury, and they have, an absolute love affair with Trump in their mind, or they absolutely hate the man. How likely is it? I mean, both of these sides are highly qualified lawyers, but how likely is it that you could have a mole? Heaven forbid, it's not like Jesse Waters is correct, but how likely is it that you could have someone who could get through this entire process, have scrubbed their social media, scrubbed their social media and made it absolutely incapable of knowing how they strongly feel purely for the purposes of, I guess, throwing the case for Trump or against Trump?
I think it's highly unlikely. It's much less likely than John Grisham or a movie director might have you believe. What's much more likely is that people may think that they can set aside their prejudices, but all people always have subconscious feelings. I think realistically, the biggest thing that Trump is looking for are not a hidden mole. They'd have trouble finding that person if that person existed. I really think his lawyers are looking for people who look at the obvious and see things that are not obvious. The people who think that maybe there is a flat earth, or maybe we're all part of a computer simulation. They're looking for people who are a little unusual and see the world differently. But I don't really think you have to be too worried about the diabolical John Grisham-like scenario.
I mean, if you walk into the jury room wearing a MAGA hat saying birds aren't real and you're a Patriots fan, maybe they think that you're pro-Trump. Katie, I want to ask you this because, one of the other elements of this is, again, we talked about Trump's danger, some of the problems he presents, and he has already violated his gag order 7 different times. And this is a quote from the judge. I think this is really key. Defendant is directed to refrain from making or directing others to make public statements about any prospective juror or any juror in this criminal proceeding. This is the thing. And we've talked a little bit about this, but I want to know how far this goes, right? What is the scale of consequences for Donald Trump continuing to violate the gag order? Because it doesn't seem like anybody has it in them. He's been violating gag orders like crazy, right? He's a dog chasing cars. He doesn't know what he's going to do, but he's just going to keep chasing the cars. So no one's throwing him in jail. People have penalized him. They've said it's bad. They give him a smack on the wrist, and he keeps going. What could actually happen here? What's the worst that could happen to him if he continues to violate the gag order? And heaven forbid, something dangerous ends up happening.
The short answer and the immediate answer to your question is he could go to jail. He could be incarcerated. That is allowed for under the New York laws and applicable procedures. It's a fine up to $1,000 each time, but it also can be a fine and jail, or a fine or jail. Putting it into context, Jason, the other times that he violated gag orders, for example, Justice Engoron's gag order where he got dinged $15,000 or whatever, that was in a civil fraud case. This is a criminal case. And that is why you see what Renato pointed out earlier in this hour, that the judge is not allowing the defense to get the names of these witnesses in advance because of a fear of what Donald Trump is going to do. I know a lot of people who are tuning in and watching right now are very impatient, and they don't understand why Judge Merchan hasn't done anything yet. But I want to reassure people that on Tuesday, there is a process and a procedure by which this contempt hearing has to be taking place. Under the rules and the law, you actually have to have an evidentiary hearing. It cannot just be the judge saying, I'm holding you in contempt of court, have a nice day. You have to afford Donald Trump, and I know it sounds unfair, but it's the way that due process is. You have to afford Donald Trump the opportunity at an evidentiary hearing to be able to show cause, meaning prove or show why he should not be held in contempt of court, because that is what the prosecution is seeking in this instance. And that is what is going to happen on Tuesday. And that is why Judge Merchan today took all of those violations of the gag order and said, I'm putting them all to be heard on Tuesday morning, and that's going to be done in the morning. I would also note, Jason, another kind of component that's happening here is, you know, when our colleague Yasmin Vasugian interviewed one of those excused jurors, she said, and I know we all laugh about it, she said, he looked less orange in person. Now, I beg to differ. I don't know if he looks less orange, but the reality is she's seeing a man that is forced to have to sit in court, and you take away all of the bluster and you take away all of this idea in the public, in the media about what a big guy this guy is. And he's just this old dude sitting there looking orange and tired. And what it does, though, is I think it recalibrates everybody from the judge to the lawyers to the jurors to understand he's just a guy. He is not a deity. He is not a cult leader. He is just a man who has violated the laws. And just like all of us that violate a law, there's going to be consequences. So when he violates a gag order, the judge is going to say, you know what? You're not learning your lesson, and I can put you in jail. Or I can take you out of court. I can make you sit privately somewhere else where you cannot be in the courtroom. I won't let you have access to a phone. I mean, there's remedies there, Jason, and we're going to see exactly what happens when we have that hearing on Tuesday.
Hey everyone, MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.